Fidel Castro refers to himself as being of Latin African heritage. And we're going to get to that. And here we are talking about heritage. But there's something beyond heritage that connects us. There's something beyond heritage that connects, okay? Even beyond the region, and you can still claim region because we talk about the Caribbean and it's part of the Americas, it's part of that new world. We said that some person were perplexed when I said the Caribbean is an invention of the 20th century, and they couldn't understand what do I mean by the Caribbean being an invention of the 20th century. And I said, of course, those aren't my words. Let me not plagiarize. The Caribbean is an invention of the 20th century. So what will it be in the 21st century? That's from the Caribbean reader. What will it be? And when we talk about the 20th century, when we talk about the 20th century, we're talking about the 1900s up to. When people think about the 20th century, they think 2021, 2022, 2001. Of course, I was confused about that as well when I was, even after undergrad, until later on I read, when you study history and so on, you understand the 20th century is talking about the previous year. The 19th century is not talking about, it's talking about the 18th century and up. So anyways, this is an important point. We talk about the Caribbean being an invention of an invention. We're part of the new world. The Caribbean is part of the new world. Caribbean, and when we talk about, and because the Caribbean is referred to as being part of that new world. Now, there are those who might challenge that. I challenge that. I challenge the Caribbean being part of that new world. I am challenging that. And we challenge that because we read Arawak's The Africans, and we challenged that. We said, absolutely not. Absolutely not. Christopher Columbus did not discover Jamaica and the Caribbean. But then, when you start to study language, when you start to study things properly, when we start to situate and contextualize it, it depends. And last week I talked about it depends. And it depends. Of course, we said Kant said of history. Kant said of history. History is a result of the varieties of human nature and circumstance. Okay. So of course we talk about it depends when we talk about Christopher Columbus discovering, and we say that it wasn't necessarily a discovery. It was a capture. But then we said, yes, we call it capture, or the Indians or the natives, or the originals, but the Europeans would not call it so. The Europeans who through conquest, who took control of that land, it became part. And that, I will not be hypocritical. I'm not going to be hypocritical in my argument. Because, it was always the case, you marry somebody, you take on that person's name. Or whenever nations fight other nations, then those nations become part of that nation. Okay, that was always the case from Greco-Roman, so on and so forth. That was always the case. Through wars and conquest, other lands became part of the land, and they adopt the identity, the Christianity, the religion, the culture of the king, of the pharaoh, of the emperor, whatever it might be. So in fact, there was one time people talk about a religion of practice or culture, or a religion of the spirit, because there was, when you talk, that's for Caribbean theology though, or from another theology class, or if you want to study celebration of disciplines, or spiritual formation speaks to that, spiritual formation. But outside of that, when England came, they came in the name of the king, and those two, and they were going to be, and the people who occupied these lands, of course, as part of the conquest. So yes, and beyond that, we talk about privilege, power, and position. We talk about the status quo. We talk about part of the process of colonization, and I did not define colonization and decolonization in this class as yet. which is on one of our presentation to define Frantz Fanon talks about decolonization, the stripping away of the human. Sorry, colonization, not decolonization. Colonization, the stripping away. Colonization in its very raw term, in its very simplistic term, is to control. To colonize is to control. But when you study colonization or post-colonialism, whatever the case might be, you have to go beyond that. How do we control? And today we're hearing about the Wagner Group. I was just publishing that very breaking story, and I never got a chance to finish it because of the class. When we take a break, I hope I get a chance to do that. But anyways, I actually went off on a tangent because I was talking. Anyway, we talk about discovery and the fact that one of the most important points is that we said that, Christopher, we live in this new world. The new world, in other words, it was called the New World. It's new because it became part of that Western civilization. It is the newest lands. It is the newest lands that was adopted into. In fact, it wasn't on any European map per se. The Europeans who was fighting for dominance of the world. So they discovered it in the sense that, and we said that, please remember, in a part of slavery, part of the racialization of people, of humanity, the strategy behind that was to degrade a set of people who people could treat as property to prop up the others. That's a very important point I just made. I hope you understand that point I just made. Part of the strategy of the racialization of humanity, racialization of humanity. Now, UIHS will tell you that they believe in the issue of race. I am going to tell you, your professor is going to tell you that race is a creation, it's a human creation. There was no idea of race before the 1600s. I wrote an article about that, I believe, and I'm developing a paper and research about that. But and by the way, it's not my idea. If you read and so on, you'll read in history. If you read when the idea of race, there was no race in the sense that there was no white and black and Indian and so on. People never thought about themselves in terms of race. And when the theory of race was developed, it was not accepted as part of academia. It was not accepted as part of academia. And I'm actually, the reason why my screen is muted is because I haven't had a chance to really get myself ready. So, and I'm in my tank top and I have my white shirt. My assistant just brought my attire for class today, but I had to get into this lecture. I started talking about some other thing, but this is a very important issue I'm making about the about the issue of race. And when we study Caribbean, how far back do we go? We go far back because we talk about Kant talks about history is a result of the varieties of human nature and circumstances. And therefore, if that is the case, and according to the scholars from the Caribbean reader, if you were to read that book from cover to cover and get the essence of it, talking about the invention of the Caribbean, and I agree with them being an invention in more ways than one. We're an invention, and then we were made to be a dependent capitalist state. Yes. Now we will get to that when we watch the film Life and Death on Wednesday. That's if our professor doesn't come on Wednesday to come and share with us. If he doesn't come, chances are he will not come because he is swamped. And there is a very important issue happening in Haiti right now. So I suspect he will be here next week. That's great because I want an opportunity to have you watch the film Life and Death on Wednesday. Anyways, that's beside the point. Whatever the case might be. We talk about how far do you go? How far do you go when you study Caribbean thought? You go far because we talk about the Caribbean being an invention, part of the New World, part of the Americas. We're not just Jamaica, we're part of the Americas. And we are part of an experience, a set of people who have a predominant aspect of our features, which is said to be of African lineage or African lineage, outside of anything else that give us prominence and value or claim to anything. Okay? Outside of all of that, we have a particular experience emanating from the racialization. And I say to you, when the idea of race came about in the 1600s, it was on the back shelves. It wasn't accepted as part of academia. It was seen as just as how the theory of Darwinism was seen as a theory. Okay. There was no scientific basis to it. So it was the same is said of race. It was a theory. However, when you do your research and you study societies and the development of privilege, power, and positions, and the dominance and the development of privilege in society, when you study that, you look at how, and you study, and I talk about the issue of control. Control is the stripping away of a person's humanity. Control, you redefine the person. And we control people in so many different ways, systematically, and even within our lives, even within our own cultures, even in terms of how we treat other people. Sometimes we're colonized such a way to redefine people in order now to oppress them, to mete out to them the indignity of humanity. Colonization is about control, but it is systematically done through language, through culture, various systems, and through the creation of race, or categories, or classes in society, or caste. Talk about a caste system or a class system, which is economic, same thing anyways. Class, caste, race. And then lumping people in some kind of categories, in some kind of way, as if we're part of this human race, as if we're competing. And to be honest, I say to you, we are part of a competitive world. When we got independence in 1962, that was great. Independence was what means a victory for nationalists. Nationalism is about self-determination, the right to self-determine, the right to self-govern, and to chart your way forward and so on. But then little did these Caribbean nationalists know what was brewing. What was brewing? The speed towards globalization. The world, okay, now we're moving towards globalization. Globalization is what? Globalization in its very raw definition is the crisscrossing of goods and services. Globalization is the crossing of goods, where goods and services cross borders. Okay, but we're moving towards globalization, dismantling of national borders, of economic walls, and talk multinationalism and transnationalism. The world was speeding towards that, and capitalists and the profiteers and the dominant class, the financiers, and first, of course, moving from mercantilism and the society of a monarchical society, they were part of to now financiers and managers and some of these the spillover nobles who still had money from back in the days of conquest. As we're moving towards, because when you study economic system in the world, we study Caribbean thought. Yes, you're going to study. You study capitalism, and of course you study socialism. You want to study capitalism. You want to have an understanding of capitalism, and we will spend some time to discuss capitalism. In fact, I will share some of my stuff. I will share with you. It's only for you guys. Okay, I talked at length, and I wrote a 15-page argument talking about how do we decipher between neoliberalism as against liberalism, capitalism as against neo-capitalism, socialism? Yes. How do we decipher against that? How do we decipher? Now, when you study Caribbean thought, it involves looking at society's economics. It involves looking at what pertains in society, what kind of society we have in the Caribbean, what kind of society economic systems we have, and how does that affect us? Now, of course, we will watch the film Life and Death, and then we're going to watch Who Shot the Sheriff after that. And then we're going to watch Corruption. Those are the 3 films we will watch in this class. We won't have enough time to do anything else because I have so much material for you guys. It is, and what I have a lot of material for you guys, a tremendous amount. But previously the classes complained about the reading and so what I've done now is my job is to have you guys familiarize yourself with the material and with the reading. Okay, familiarize yourself with the books that we have and what we talk about post-colonialism, and because you guys, we live in the Caribbean, and as academics and as theologians and social workers and so on, going out in the field, some of these concepts are very important. We talk about how do we treat with people's issues in societies, how do we promote, how do we empower the family. I mean, I worked for majority of my time here in the US, I worked, well, about half of the time here in the US, I worked as a social worker. I work as a case manager, and then I directed an organization. I was the Philadelphia County Director for the Family Group Decision Making Conference in NYT, which is part of the services of social work. Now, and of course, how do we practice social work? And some of the problems that we face is we have economic systems, and we have work-related issues in societies that, of course, we have to relate to. So this is a very important issue. We talk about the racialization of society, the race as a strategy. So I said race was not accepted. Race was not accepted as a theory until it became useful. It became useful as an argument to justify the enslavement of a whole set of people in Africa to utilize in the triangular slave trade. Now, this is a very important point I am making. We're going to take a short break, about 10 minutes, no, 5 minutes break, and then we'll come back, and I'm going to delve into a particular article looking at looking at West Indian slavery, the issue of compensation. And when we have finished with that, and I think when we're finished with that, we're going to look at I have a video. I have a video today which I'm going to play. But there are 2 things I want to do today. But I also want to share a little bit of the breaking story that I'm working on. And at first I said, why would I don't think this is important to Caribbean thought. But I said, actually, part of Caribbean thought was always to look at breaking story of the day. One of the big international news of the day is what's going in Russia and Ukraine, and this Wagner mutiny, and so on and so forth. So that's a breaking news story that's developing, and I want to jump on it, but I want to share it with you guys, and you can talk about it amongst your friends, because they are even in the Wagner group. They're even in Africa. They are in Africa. I mean, when you listen to the report, they are even in Africa. You think they're only in Russia and Ukraine? Anyways, we will talk a little bit about that later on. But I was making a very important point that slavery was not accepted until it was useful as an argument, it was useful as a plausible argument. This is how Augustine's Confessions. Augustine was not of Augustine became Augustine. When you study, I had the opportunity of studying Greek history, and Augustine came up in my Greek history. And when you read Greek, Augustine is a very important church father. But what happened before he became a church father? And when you read how his writings became engrafted into some of our churches, catechisms and so on, it's quite interesting. But Augustine was seen as a periphery. He was not seen as important. He was not, his writing then was not part of the writings of the day. He wasn't a go-to person. It became useful within the development of Christianity because they saw that his writing resonated with some of the teaching of Christianity, but it even embellished it and made it even much more intense. I wonder what else was made intense in our Caribbean development and experience. So when all of this started from talking about, of course, our good friend, our good brother who will be facilitating a class through one of these days for us, probably this week or next week. And I talk about the fact that how his idea of demonstrate moving beyond the idea of heritage, linking it with experience. And even there are those who even force ripen apple, like Sailor James and Fidel Castro. That was how tight, that was how connected, that was the symbiotic relationship, not even symbiotic relationship. Okay. It went beyond that. The connections of the Caribbean experience, of the West Indian experience. And okay, so that was quite powerful to see somebody and so how are we to respond in the Caribbean? What takeaways are we to have when we see people who are working on those fronts? But there are those who say, I sound as if I'm preaching, I apologize. But I'm an ordained minister and I used to preach for years. But please excuse me. My professor at Penn used to say, boy, Ronaldo, you sound so preachy. And she would apologize for me. She said, class, please, Ronaldo is from a particular experience and he's going to be sounding preachy, but that is his style. So I apologize. But I say to you, how are we to respond when we see, in fact, there was one time when the Haitians, there was something happening in Haiti, and many of the Haitians were flocking to Jamaica for refuge as refugees. I think it was in the late 90s, and it continued throughout. Quite a few Haitians, and many Jamaicans were upset about that. Many Jamaicans were upset. Many Jamaicans were incensed by that. Many Jamaicans demonstrated against that. Of course, the argument is, of course, Jamaica, we're going through our own issue, we're having our own issues, and so why we have them, and and sometimes there is, why do we have these Haitians coming to Jamaica and so on and so forth. There was one time some Jamaicans were saying that, and for those of us who can remember, you'll remember that. And I don't know if Dane is here, and others, Maxine is my age, so she would remember that time. Right, Maxine?
Yes, sir.
Right, weren't Jamaicans upset about the Haitians coming here?
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
I will never forget that. And I'm telling you, that is quite interesting in terms of, so I said to you, how are we to respond? Talk about Caribbean unity. But then at the same time, Caribbean people, Jamaicans, we're looking to travel. We're looking to go to where there are opportunities. That was always about the Caribbean experience. Anyway, we're gonna take a quick 10 minute. We're gonna take a 10 minutes break. Actually, we're gonna take a 10 minute, 10 to 15, a 10 minutes break because, and then when we come back, I'm gonna play a little bit concerning the breaking news on the Wagner group. That's a big news going on right now. I don't know how Jamaicans feel about that. If Jamaicans are caught talking about that, and whether or not there are traces of the Wagner group in the Caribbean. I don't know if there, if we know of any, and whether whether or not their influence stretch as far as to the Caribbean. You know, so it's quite interesting to know what's going on in the world. And of course, I'm going to read an article about West Indian compensation. I'm going to share with you a short video that I did on Germantown Radio. It was just talking about, I don't know if I should do it, but actually I won't do that. I showed the video. The video is actually a presentation on the Haitian crisis. And then I'm not going to continue with tracing the outline this week. The plan was to do it today, but if I have a chance, we will get into that on Wednesday, okay? But we're gonna take a quick 10 minutes break. We'll come back at around, it's 7:40. We come back at 7:50. Can I tell you that I published this episode? I mean, some of this on my podcast. That's good. So breaking news, and there are people in Ghana that watch the podcast, that watch my videos and stuff. Because I discovered that there are a lot of Jamaicans that live in Ghana, and so a lot of them also watch my show to see what's going on in Jamaica and the world. So just for people in Ghana and other parts of the world, that Keon, one of my students in Jamaica Theological Seminary, is showing samples. It's not really samples, actual notes. There are new notes, the new Jamaican dollar notes. That's the $5,000 bill. That's what Sangster, who was on their former bank. That's not Sangster. Who is that? Who are those two people on the 5,000? Who are the people on the $5,000 bill? What's that? That's the $5,000 bill. So when was this released?
The 6th of June, I think.
So, as of the 6th of June, Jamaica now have a new notes, and they're styling. I think the Canadians have a note like that. Some countries in Canada, some countries are going that way now. So I think it's probably cheaper. So that's quite interesting. I wonder, did anybody hear when the government made this announcement in Jamaica? Or the Bank of Jamaica, when the Bank of Jamaica made this announcement, what was the reaction?
Everybody had mixed feelings.
Okay, but what was the argument? What was the argument? What that the Jamaican government or the Bank of Jamaica provided?
He was saying it's long lasting, it's more beneficial for the blind, because when they feel at the back, it's different shapes. So for the $1,000, it's a round shape, and for the 5,000, it's a triangle. So
Okay.
yeah, so they said it's waterproof. So
what? Okay. Oh wow. Okay, that's good. There's some people who I get. Okay, so I think a lot of people who this had money destroyed through water, easily torn up, and I don't think it's easily replaceable sometimes. So, okay, that's good. For durability, it's more durable. That's good, and it's probably cost effective for the government as a whole. It saved the government a lot of money. I'm gonna pause my screen a little bit. Yeah, go ahead, Dane.
Yeah, I was saying one of the issues I have is that we just recently, and I'm speaking relatively here, produced a $5,000 bill. The $5,000 bill is still new, practically new in circulation. So it's like, to me, it's a waste of the money spent to make those $5,000 bills, because we're now to take them out of circulation in a short while.
I agree.
Oh, okay. So that means they have the government, in a sense, is losing. But I guess in the short run, I'm not sure. So, what's the cost? Do you know the cost of what's going to cost the government to replace, or are they replacing?
I don't think they have told us the cost that they have incurred to produce these new bills, but they did say that we will recover the cost in the long run because these bills will last longer than the paper ones that we have.
Okay. Ramin, you have a response. Go ahead.
Yes, sir. As what Dane was saying, the government is saying that these notes will be, it will last longer on the market because they can't really get torn up on those stuff. So these notes will allow the government to spend less money on printing back the paper notes. So that is one of the logical reasons.
I think that's
But,
the main.
but here's the problem. Here's the problem. Persons had issues with the money, some parts of it rubbing off and different defects that it had. So some persons had to have their money recalled and replaced. So I don't know now that the people are getting a hold of these monies. I don't know what will happen in terms of the defectiveness, the level of defectiveness that we might see across the board. So let's wait and see how much we are really gaining or losing in the long run.
Yes, and also I've heard that some of the people they're having problems like as it relates when you go to the ATM to do a transaction, for example, not a withdrawal, a deposit. Sometimes you can't deposit the money. So people are having those challenges. But I guess maybe in the near future all this will be sorted out. So let's watch and see.
Sir, even to run them through a money machine is hard because in the jams.
Yes. You are breaking up a little bit. Something was wrong with your device, I think.
I was saying that even to run them through a money machine, the machine is the jams when they're going through, they're not going through as regular notes would.
Yeah,
Oh,
sir, the
okay.
machines haven't been calibrated to accept those notes. But I personally feel like, because of how defective these notes are, it's going to be a case where after we have given up all of the old notes, they probably recall it, and this is sort of setting the stage for the whole digital currency thing that they want to bring in, because it seems all too coincidental.
Wait, who said that just now? Chantel Laws. That's
Yes.
interesting. That's an interesting point. And that's a discussion we need to have. Actually, I wrote an article, did a podcast that talks about cryptocurrency, and the Jamaican government have loans with China. China has been lending money everywhere, even in developing countries and middle income countries, even Argentina. And I've asked, so what's the expectation now? Are countries going to be responsible for repaying China in cryptocurrency and not the US dollar? But
well, that's the direction that China is heading in now, and it seems like that is the direction based on the conversations that have been happening from the news in the political sphere, that is the direction that the government wishes to take Jamaica in.
But I actually heard the Prime Minister some time ago saying that in Parliament they're not going to get rid of the Jamaican dollar and so on and so forth. They're not going to go with currency or anything digital. I think I heard him saying that.
He did say that, sir. But honestly, just like with do you remember during COVID, they said, listen, we're not going to mandate vaccines. However, they put us in a position where we had to take the vaccines because we wanted to maintain our jobs. I think it's going to just be a case where, we'll have to switch over because these bills are defective. They're rubbing off. People are having to recall them already, and they've only just now been put on the market.
Oh, wow. That's quite interesting.
It is very interesting.
Yes, I see somebody on. Ramin, were you going to say something? We will follow this story some more. In fact, if I can get somebody to talk about this, to come to my class from the Bank of Jamaica or the Department of Finance, talking about some economic outlook for Jamaica as it relates to the cryptocurrency, what that means for Jamaica and by extension the Caribbean. Actually, I'm going to see if we could get somebody. In fact, you know what? That's what I will do. I'm going to try and get somebody to come from one of those experts from the Bank of Jamaica, or from one of the Minister of Finance, and probably we could have them do a presentation and talk with us some more about this new bill, the new currency, also in relation to looking at it not just from Jamaica but also in the Caribbean, and the issue of this cryptocurrency. In fact, how much did Jamaica lose? Did Jamaica lose any money as well? I mean, or the Caribbean, how did we fare economically in terms of the cryptocurrency? Because cryptocurrency had, in a sense, was losing value, but yet still China and the BRIC countries are still heading in that direction. They're still pursuing replacing the US dollar with cryptocurrency. How does that affect Jamaica and the Caribbean? What are the opportunities for Jamaica and the Caribbean? These are important discussions for us to have as well. And I'm going to see if I could bring somebody to discuss that with us. But if not, I will do the research and do a presentation too, based on the economic outlook. That's one of the topics in the class, the socioeconomics of the Caribbean, looking at the socioeconomic aspect of the Caribbean. That's one of the things and that's chapter 3 of neoliberalism. I did chapter 1 to 3. It was an overview of the socioeconomic context of Jamaica, and with some comparisons of the Caribbean. And then when you watch the film Life and Death, it will provide some kind of visuals for you guys. And I say visual of, as much as they're talking Life and Death, they're talking about Jamaica. It's based on a film. It's based on a book about Antigua. So that's why, the experiences in the Caribbean, a lot of our experiences are similar. But of course, we still do not make the same mistake of lumping and of generalizing one. But we can even generalize not only as Caribbean people, but even within the Caribbean. In fact, you might find somebody here in Jamaica whose philosophy and ideology and ideas align with somebody in Cuba, like Michael Manley, of course. Does it make him less of a Jamaican? Or is he selling out to the next? Can as much as we are for the nation, does it extend to a kind of individuality that moves away from the location of the dominant? Because we talk about the dominant globally, but there's also the dominant locally. But this is interesting. Anyways, but we're going to move on to the topic I'm going to share my screen with you now. That there's something I don't know if I have time to share that podcast with you guys on the mutiny and what's going on with I don't think I have time to share that because I have a lecture that I want to present to you guys today. I'm going to share my screen now. Let's see, do that. And what's that? Share. I'm sharing my screen. This is actually a podcast. This is the episode I wanted you to listen to, just briefly. Good evening. I'm Ronaldo McKenzie, and welcome to another episode of the Neoliberal Round podcast. Tonight, we bring you a special report on the Wagner Group, a private military company that has been making headlines for its footprints and influence around the world. In an astonishing turn of events, the group's leader, Yevgeny Prigozhin, declared an all-out war on the Russian state, throwing Vladimir Putin's government and Ukraine war effort into crisis mode. But the Wagner Group's activities extend far beyond Ukraine and Russia. According to the Sofan Center, the Wagner Group has been militarily or politically active in numerous countries, with a particular focus on Africa. They function like a Swiss Army knife, providing not only military training and combat operations, but also advising government leadership on political issues and conducting information campaigns. However, their actions pose a catch-22 situation, where they stabilize fragile states, but also invite further instability, creating more demand for their services. Wagner's involvement goes beyond scrutiny services. They are reportedly involved in illicit activities such as supporting sanctions, evasion and trafficking, and deconstruction of cultural property. In Africa, Wagner has become an extension of Moscow's foreign policy and influence, displacing Western presence and discrediting counter-terrorism partners and peacekeeping missions. Their brutality and support for predatory governments could exacerbate conditions exploited by violent extremist groups. The future of the Wagner Group remains uncertain after the mutiny and negotiations mediated by Belarus. Their legacy, however, has already entrenched the use of private military companies by Russia, proving successful in various ways. With their ability to raise funds, deploy effectively, and evade sanctions, Russia is likely to continue expanding the use of such companies. But how did this mutiny unfold? And what does it mean for Russia and the international community? Let's dive into the details. On June 23, 2023, Yevgeny Prigozhin led a convoy of mercenaries on a march toward Moscow, declaring a war against the Russian state. The mutiny, which caught the Russian military off guard, escalated rapidly and ended abruptly, leaving confusion in its wake. After storming through towns in southern Russia, Wagner troops returned to their field camps following negotiations mediated by Belarus. Now, the mutiny had been building over months due to grievances related to the war in Ukraine. Prigozhin blamed the Russian military for corruption and greed, alleging that the war was a racket to enrich the Russian elite. The mutiny was further fueled by an order that would compel Wagner fighters to sign a formal contract with the Russian Ministry of Defense. Putin labeled the mutiny treasonous and vowed punishment for those involved. While Wagner has gained prominence with its involvement in conflicts worldwide, including Ukraine, Syria, and Africa, its effectiveness should not be overstated. It has suffered defeats and faced international scrutiny for alleged human rights abuses. However, its presence as a quasi-state. Okay, I'm going to stop there. I won't play any more of that. I just played it because it's what's going on in the world, talking about the Wagner Group. And the Wagner Group, their job is to destabilize, to go in other parts of the world. It's a strategy of Russia to go in other parts of the world to destabilize it. And then, of course, once destabilization happens, then they are used. Then the dominant country, whoever, or the hired guns, go in and take over, or they are used, or they create destability, and then they come back to create stability. In a sense, they create the instability in order to create the stability. It's as if and I'm going to point to COVID. It's as if COVID that they said there was a new research that uncovers that COVID was discovered in a lab. I mean, what happened is that they were making research in Wuhan, China, and a report just came out recently, and I got a copy of that report. And Congress, they did a congressional report on the Wuhan, on what happened in the Wuhan lab and the COVID and how COVID came about. And when you look, and according to the report, of course, what happened is that they were the same lab that was making the research, the same lab that was making the COVID vaccine, that was developing the vaccine or whatever to treat COVID. That same lab was responsible for the COVID pandemic. I mean, it's no, I'm not, this is not a, and by the way, let me show you my, this is not conspiracy, guys. I'm not telling you news. That this is actually, this has been around for a while, and I've been talking about this for a while. And now they have a report. The same lab, guys, the same lab that was doing research to develop a drug or a vaccine to treat with a pandemic like COVID. That's where COVID came from. Apparently there was an outbreak. Apparently there was a break somewhere. And the next thing, okay, apparently there was. How convenient. It's quite interesting. Anyways, I just wanted to so anyway, it's quite, these things are, and eventually, of course, they affect the Caribbean. They affect the and the point I was making is how crisis is created. How crisis is created. How crisis is created as a strategy, to provide opportunity for a few people. Billionaires, investors were already investing, and we're not going to cite the Chinese government, okay? Because there were billionaire investors who had invested in this development, in this research. Billionaire here in the US and in the Western world. And now who are profiting from it. Some Americans did not get their extra funds because they said that they used it to pay for COVID vaccines. So some of our tax dollars went there, or tax returns or refunds. Some of our refund went there. But anyways, the Wagner Group, the Wagner Group is quite interesting that their operations go far beyond Russia. They are also in Africa. What plans do they have for Jamaica? What preparations what are we doing to prepare or for such groups like the Wagner Group? But countries had always done that, because when you look at even in the Caribbean reader, in the Caribbean reader, and they talk about 1980s, the People's Revolutionary Party of Grenada, and how Bishop was assassinated. He was first hailed as a savior and a hero, and the next breath he was killed. And of course, what you have, it was the CIA, the CIA had a presence. Sorry? Somebody had something to say? Probably it was an error. But the point I'm making here, which is quite an important point, talk about crisis, what happened in the 1970s with the oil crisis. Was that an oil crisis of strategy? Because what happened, we know that the Caribbean, many of the global South countries had to go to the World Bank and the IMF and the global North countries, the post-industrial countries, to get money, to borrow money, which ultimately led to their demise, their dependency, and their lack because of the 1970s oil crisis. The oil crisis, where they reduce oil production, which is strategy, which drives up the price. It's an issue of demand and supply. You drive, okay, Jamaica, we don't have oil, except for Trinidad and Venezuela and Guyana. But Guyana was still one of the poorest countries in the region. They have oil, but they're not profiting from it. We have bauxite, but we're not profiting from it. Trinidad they have oil as well, and they're not as, in terms of the economics, is not as, I mean, at one time they were relatively have a strong GDP, but they are still dealing with there's still certain economic lack and dependency. They're not benefiting from the Caribbean. We have resources, but we're not benefiting from it. And now look what's going on in the Caribbean. Okay, fine. They said, okay, our industry revolves around servitude, serving other people. I'm getting ready for the Life and Death film on Wednesday, just so you know, because you guys are gonna watch it, and when you watch it, it's gonna be powerful. Don't watch it yet, okay, guys? Please don't watch it yet. Wait until you come to class on Wednesday to watch it. But anyways, but I'm preparing you for that based on the point. The point I'm making is very important, and you'll get to see this film, get to see this video again. I'm raising several issues here as it relates to the Caribbean, and the point I'm making in terms of economic or the resources of the Caribbean. What resources? Okay, Trinidad or Barbados, bauxite or oil, but of course we talk about so the Caribbean is rich in resources. We have a lot of resources here. Outside of the minerals and so on, there is tourism, and of course the people with their music and the rhythm and dance and so on and so forth, and the culture that we got. But outside of that, in terms of our economics, first of all, we're not making, okay, fine, it's the resources of a country also helps to generate wealth, but we're not making money off our resources. And if we make any, and if we have resources to make it, we're still, if the people who are always ahead, the people who always had a competitive advantage, find a way to dismiss the competition, find a way to loosen the competition. So although the Caribbean is rich in resources, and by the way, in the 1950s, Jamaica we discovered oil and bauxite, and and of course, yeah, the Caribbean was trending in an upward direction. And in one of the last Caribbean class, I showed a map that shows the GDP. GDP is the gross domestic product of a country. Okay, all these things that you produce per cap, and so on and so within the country. That's the gross domestic product, and the gross domestic product is what you have to sell to make money to feed the people, so on and so forth. So you look at, and of course you can compare the GDP of Trinidad, Tobago, so on and so forth. But Jamaica compared to the other Caribbean countries, Jamaica was one of the strongest in terms of our GDP at the time when we were moving towards independence. Jamaica discovered bauxite in 1957, and it was for years one of the top earners in terms of bauxite. But in a sense, although it's a top earner, we weren't generating the kind of profits from it. And even now, what has happened is that we've sold off, or we've privatized the bauxite industry, or okay, fine, we own the mineral, we own the bauxite in Jamaica, or Trinidad, they own the oil, so on and so forth, they own it, but in a sense they're not benefit. If we do own it, we don't benefit from it. So what you have in the 90s, what you have with bauxite now is in the Caribbean, in Jamaica in particular, our economic activity, as it relates to any important resource that we can have that can help us to move towards prosperity and any kind of competitiveness, economic competitiveness. Because while we are competitive in our sports and music, but we are not. So, and if we can have a competitive advantage in anything, we just can't. It's the way. So we export the bauxite. We excavate it, or we mine the bauxite. But that's it. But then we sell the bauxite to Alpart or to some other company, and then we can't even. And then it is to mine the bauxite. It is so capital intensive. When I talk about capital intensive investment, And if you're gonna, in Life and Death, you're gonna hear Michael Manny talking about economic growth. By the way, there's a difference between economic growth and economic development. Okay, growth and development. Growth and development. And we're going to talk about that a little bit, but he talks about economic development in order to spur on growth. You need development for growth to happen. Infrastructure, science and technology, people, and all of that. All of those things affect your growth. So the development as against the growth, very important distinction. Okay. So, and we talk about stages of development. But what has lacked, what has dogged the Caribbean, what has affected the Caribbean is our inability to utilize or to own or whatever, any kind of capital intensive technology that we need in order to do the mining or those serious technological. So although we own it, we still sell out some of it to Alpart and to other companies because it's expensive for us to do the mining. And okay, let's say we own 80% of that. We sell that out. So we export the raw material to the US or wherever, to the US actually. And we export it to the US and they use the bauxite to turn into aluminium and so on. And they sell it back to Jamaica because we need it. They sell it back to make our wires and stuff. And but I'm making a very important point. Our economic, when you study specialization, and if you study economics, Adam Smith and Taylor and so on, to talk about this scientific method. Even when you start to study psychology and looking at it from the Maslow's hierarchy of needs, all this hierarchy conditioning people to think hierarchical. Anyways, irrespective of that, outside of Maslow's, we're not looking at Maslow. Forget Maslow and psychology for now. Let's think about it in an economic sense in terms of specialization and division of labor. But when you think about specialization and division of labor, don't just think about work in a vacuum. Think about it in a global framework in terms of countries and people within a particular country or a particular location or people who are of a particular race. So in Jamaica, our economic activity, so when you look at stage of development, our economic activity or our participation in the production process revolves around where? The raw material, okay, in terms of all the division of labor or the specialization. And then we send it to the post-industrial country or the global north for the finished, and that's where for the finished product. But our economic activity, that's it. We can only excavate and mine the stuff. We send it abroad for them to do the finishing. And that's where you make the most money. So as much as we make money, we don't make the money that we should be making from bauxite, and then we turn around and buy back the finished product. We buy it back from these. Okay. So I have often So that's another important issue as it relates to tourism. Okay, fine. Jamaicans, they have killed our agricultural industry, banana industry in a sense. And our milk industry and so on, and with all these products all these products that come in from overseas. And of course we can do, and by the way, when you start to read, of course that was my study, that was my research, my research looks at this in depth and looks at the strategy and the period of penetration and what that means for the Caribbean and countries of the global south, how the global north was able to penetrate after we got independent in the 1960s, and we have pride all of a sudden, globalization, and then one of what helped to spur on globalization, the crisis of the oil crisis, okay, and then of course we go to the World Bank and the global north, these countries looking for money, and they said, and of course, yeah, and they place conditions on the loans. You have to do this XYZ. You have to sell yourself. You have to, again, you have to liberalize. You have to get rid of any notion of nationalism, in a sense. In a sense, you have the nation, but you don't really have it, in a sense, you know. But in a sense, it was good that that former colonies got independence, because when you look at it from the colonial master perspective, because okay, it was costing them a lot of money to carry these countries. It was okay, economically speaking, it's cheaper for countries like Jamaica and Trinidad and Guyana to become independent nations. Utilize a bureaucratic, pharisaical, neo-capitalistic system in order to maintain, establish, or preserve power and dominance. That's neo-capitalism, in a sense. So, of course, conditions were placed on loans, and of course, they have to get rid of tariff, in a sense, slowly get rid of tariff, slowly devalue the Jamaican dollar, which at one time was stronger than the US dollar. And all these other countries in the Caribbean. Well, Jamaica had to devalue, and then at one time, when they created the Caribbean single, and of course, the Caribbean is to be blamed as well, because we could not, we can't be, we just get independent, and we it's not that if we got reparations, and in the sense, yes, they were the banana preferential treatment, banana, well, the Caribbean countries could export banana under some preferential agreement. They'll waive a lot of stuff, and we were able, but in the 1990s, thanks to Bill Clinton and the North America Free Trade Agreement in the 1990s, and the World Trade, and the establishment of the World Trade Organization, was very strategic to develop rules, but rules that would favor the dominant class, rules that would favor the global north. They were able to stop the preferential treatment. That's the only, but what we needed, as we, and I said to you, we have to look at what's going on in the world today. We have to look at what's going on in the world. I think if we were more forward thinking, and when you watch the film Life and Death, one of the farmers, big farmers, said Jamaican government were weak-kneed and lack vision. They were weak-kneed to standing up, in terms of standing up to the global north countries, and they lack vision in terms of what planning for the future, because in the 1950s and 60s, when things were booming in the Caribbean and Jamaica, they spent all of the windfall profits. They could have put that some of the money aside, but yes, they had under this notion of populism and nationalism and for the people and so on. And of course, there was a deep concern for what was going on in Jamaica. So they used a lot of the money on social welfare and social programs and projects and so on, instead of putting the money in development projects. And then, of course, by the 1970s and 80s, monies were given to the Jamaican government, and what happened? And the Caribbean, and they squandered that money for educational purposes. And nothing happened. And when we're going to show, there's another film on corruption by the NIA, the National Integrity Agency. Yes, I have to play that film on corruption with Dr. Trevor Monroe, talking about corruption. And I did a presentation on corruption, looking at the corruption indices of the Caribbean, and we're going to do a class on that, the corruption indices. I'm going to do looking at the corruption indices. And when you look at the corruption and there is a corruption index that studies corruption, a perception of corruption in the Caribbean today, and the figures changes. And when you look at the corruption, the map of the world, the darkest suggests countries where you have the highest corruption. And when you look at it, countries of the global south and newly independent countries and black countries, they have the most corruption today. They're the most corrupt compared to other parts of the world. I wonder why. Why is that so? Why do you think so? You don't have to answer that right now. But when you look at, so we talk about Jamaican government and the Caribbean government being weak-kneed and lack vision. Okay. And or maybe they made deals with we call them the nouveau rich, or the people in the Caribbean that were the elites in the Caribbean. They made deals probably, but I don't know, whatever the case is. And of course, there's a book about that. Marcos in the 1960s referred to that. at the intercontinental conference of Latin countries and so on and so forth. Talk about how some of the elites in the Caribbean and Latin countries went to Paris and Miami and spending and living it up while their countrymen while leaving their countrymen behind. And so that's the kind of independence we had, where the new elites and the people vying for power took control and make decisions, not thinking about the future, about the oil crisis in the 1970s, about globalization and what that means for the Caribbean, and so on and so forth. But they made us into an island. Okay, but we promote they promote our tourism, but but sometimes I am very suspicious of this tourism. I said to people, oh, it borders around servitude. And then what's going on in Jamaica now? They're selling off the beaches and then erecting fences around the beaches. I'm from Hillshire. I'm from Johnson's Hill. I used to live in Johnson's Hill, Hillshire. My parents, we still have the properties up there. And okay, in Johnson's Hill, not in the beach, but the Johnson Hill, when you go to the roundabout and you go up, all the way around and go up, that's where, okay, Johnson's Hill. And then, but of course, on the left, you have Fort Clarence Beach, and then you go way up and you have Hellshire Beach. Okay, you even go further on the right, you have Hellshire Park, and on the left, you have Sand Hill, St. George's Cliff, and then you have the Arawak Caves that used to be run by the urban development, by the UDC. And if you you go by at one time they were trying to, I don't know what's going on with Hellshire, but for now it's owned by the citizens, but I believe that they're building up two hotels there now, and hotels are dominating, and they're taking the best part of the beaches for the tourists and leaving the worst part for the locals. Doing the same thing that the colonial masters had done. But anyways, but the point I'm making, as if, so the tourism, and you find what's going on in the tourism today, the elites own the tourism. If it's not the elites or the Jewish family, it's people from overseas. While the locals, the majority of the people, serve the visitors, the guests, as part of the new kind of specialization and division of labor. Our specialization and division of labor borders around servitude. I paint a negative picture of it because I want people to get to understand that don't gloat in our tourism too much without studying the strategy behind it and looking at the situation that's going on within the population of the Caribbean and how our beaches are being sold off and who's making and the kind of profits that we are gaining from that. That's an important point. Why do I still have that up and running? I'm sorry about that. I should be sharing another. Here we go. So when I talk about international issues as well, because especially issues with what's going on in Russia. That's a very important issue. And we talk about the Wagner Group, talk about the evolution of the evolution of private military. And people who have the most money and the countries with the most money can utilize these private militaries. And their efforts in the world to destabilize the world, to establish or to re-establish, talk about re-establish, to re-establish, to re-monopolize, to re-control, to re-dominate through strategy. And so it's very important for, as Caribbean, as scholars, for us to study and to look at not just local dynamics in the world, but to look at international issues in the world. Now, so far in this course, I presented a lecture 2. We looked at what is Caribbean and what is the socioeconomic context. The Caribbean is an invention of the 20th century, where the Caribbean and the Caribbean people, American people, we just went through that a little bit. We didn't really delve into. Oh, we said that those are the questions that we will ask. We haven't delved into that too much yet. Critical thinking. This is part of the presentations we did previously. exploring thought and position, unveiling new discoveries of effective progress. We define critical thinking as thinking about thinking, so on and so forth. We highlighted the importance of reflection, challenging truths, and engaging with others. We talk about emphasizing the deconstruction of reality and the pursuit of progress through critical thinking. We're doing critical thinking in this class. Again, thinking about thinking and evaluating current and past truths. That is exactly what your professor or your lecturer is doing. We look at Descartes and his existential dilemma. We talk about Descartes' famous quote, "Cogito ergo sum," I think, therefore I am, and explaining Descartes' exploration of existence and the role of the mind in affirming reality. And his proof of existence is limited to one's own reality. And so therefore, that speaks to the issue of subjectivism and whether or not we can have objective truth or an objective reality. Or we can have objective reality, but we must always bear in mind that we should not be so bold in promoting an objective reality without accepting the fact that as human beings, we are driven by a subjective space, limited by time and space and the law of thermodynamics. So then, of course, then we move into critical thinkers throughout history. Influential critical thinkers like Michel Foucault and his post-modernism, Immanuel Kant and Karl Marx. We will revisit Michel Foucault later on in this course, but he talks about institutions and how institutions help to sustain. And of course, somebody mentioned the issue of sociology and functionalism or social theory and so on. But in terms of Michel Foucault, on the other hand, he wasn't a functionalist. He looks at but what he critiqued society as look at how institutions play a role in maintaining or promoting a kind of knowledge. Okay. We highlighted challenges to existing knowledge and societal norms. We briefly discussed post-colonial and postmodern perspective, how critical thinking emerges within the post-colonial and postmodern context. Analyze and evaluate. We were doing a presentation on critical thinking, and we went through all of this already. And we were supposed to go to part 2. The Negro is not any more than the white man. And by the way, this was Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon made this statement. I'm saying that because I'm going to ask you that question in the let's go to slideshow. And let's go to from current slideshow. There we go. We are definitely going to oops, I think there's a way. That's good. Part 2, the Negro is not any more than the white man. The Negro is not any more than the white man. And that's from Black Skinned White Masks. To start a new anything requires a journey in a past that begins to tell our story. Again, to start a new anything requires a journey in a past that begins to tell our story. I keep saying that we're about reinventing the 21st century, and you as scholars, West Indian scholars in Caribbean thought, you're part of that story. You're telling your own stories, and you're revisiting your own stories, not just individually, but collectively. Now, when we talk about the Negro is not any more than the white man, that's a very powerful statement. And if I were to ask you what that means, I'm not, probably you will have many colorful things to say, but it's a quite powerful and revolutionary statement. The Negro is not any more than the white man. First of all, I did not make a grammatical error when I pulled that statement from Frantz Fanon's book. if I were to ask you what is wrong, okay, let me ask you a question, guys. Okay, I'm going to ask you a question right now, and let me hear your response. Franz Fanon wrote in Black Skins, White Mask, the Negro is not any more than the white man. The Negro is not any more than the white man. Now, don't look at the top part of the statement. I'm going to put my cursor. I want you to own in on this statement. You see my cursor right now? I want you to own in on that. The Negro is not any more than the white man. And notice how I put it in parentheses, comma, after white man, and then end parentheses, Franz Fanon. But anyways, very important. But you notice now, what do you guys notice with that sentence? Is it, sorry, not with, sorry. What do you guys notice with that? The Negro is not any more than the white man. What do you guys notice with that?
Sorry, is discrediting the existence or the purpose of the black person or the black man?
He is
Discrediting the purpose and the existence of the black man in society.
Oh no, he is not discrediting. Absolutely not. He does not discredit the oh wait, did you say the black man or the white man? But he's not really discrediting anyone, actually. He's not discrediting the black man or the white man. He is doing something else. But I don't want you guys to read on yet. Stop, don't read on. But anyways, it's kind of, and the way how I write it, it's quite academic and the kind of language that is kind of high language. So even I'm going to have to explain the interpretation of that. Because the only thing that Franz Fanon said here is the Negro is not any more than the white man. That's it. Everything else is my interpretation and my read of it based on my reading of Homi Bhabha. Because she talked, well, she didn't really, based on my reading of Homi Bhabha, and not just Homi Bhabha, I think, who was it? Is it Richard Philcox? Oh, and there's somebody I need to add, Jean-Paul Sartre. Oh my God. When you study Caribbean thought or post-colonial studies, there are some people that feature, like, yes, V.S. Naipaul, C.L.R. James, Walter Rodney, Franz Fanon, but Jean-Paul Sartre, very important, Jean-Paul Sartre. And then you have to also study Michel Foucault, because Michel Foucault provides the philosophical, historical understanding and the mind behind some of the things that give rise to some of these thinkers. Homi Bhabha, Richard Philcox. But I have read Jean-Paul Sartre, Homi Bhabha, Richard Philcox. I've read those persons. Richard Philcox, Homi K. Bhabha, Jean-Paul Sartre. Okay? And they have provided a kind of perspective. And I have, but before I read them,
sir.
Yes, go ahead.
Sorry to interrupt you. Just want to find out if Franz Fanon is black or white.
Oh, no, I'm not asking if he's black or white.
No, man, I'm just asking you. I'm asking you in order to make my interpretation of what is being said.
I don't think he would have wanted you to know it. Well, I mean, actually, it is very important for you to know that anyways, because I said to you, you still want to understand the person. You want to know about the person. Okay. Did you guys get a copy of this presentation? Did I send this presentation to you guys? Chantel, did I send this presentation to the class? Chantel?
So you're breaking up.
Did I send this presentation to the class?
Which one, sir?
This one that I'm reading from. Did we send them anything on this presentation? No, we did not.
No, sir, we didn't.
Oh, wow, we need to, we didn't? Okay, what have we sent them? Okay, fine. They need to get a copy of this presentation. I thought I had sent this last week though. Anyways, okay, fine. Good question. He's on the syllabus. I thought you guys would have read him already.
Okay, sir.
But this is very important. Frantz Fanon is very important to this course. Now, whether or not he's black and white, he is black. He's from Martinique. Okay, he's from Martinique. And I will ask you, what do you know of Martinique? It was French, and it's a colonized island. It was a French colony, and Frantz Fanon was a psychologist, or like Sigmund Freud, a psychoanalytic theorist. But he was kind of groundbreaking in terms of looking at the psychoanalytic theory of man and combing it with this argument of empowerment and the whole issue of colonization and this freedom, this freed man. But I don't want to delve into him too much yet, because we're gonna, this particular slide, this presentation, as we go deeper into it, I talk about Frantz Fanon, and you will see that. But so now that you know he's black, who was it? It wasn't Maxine, was it? It was Susie. What I want you to look at is notice the statement. The Negro is not any more than the white man. And the first thing I ask you, is there anything wrong with this sentence? Let me ask you that. Is there anything wrong with that sentence? With the Negro is not any more than the white man? Suppose is there anything wrong with it? I'm going to give you an exercise right now.
No. Oh.
And I want you to write in Word. Go on Word, or open up your Gmail or an email. Open up Gmail or Google, whatever you use, okay, and write, or use Word or Google Docs. Open up a blank document and start to write. And I want you to write, the Negro is, just as how you see me write it just like that. The Negro is not, full stop, any more than the white man. Full stop. Okay? Don't put a comma. I didn't put a comma there because it's part of a complete thought. So I put a comma right after. Okay? But I want you to write this as I have it on the computer, except put a period where you see the comma after white man. So put, the Negro is not, period, any more than the white man, but write it exactly how you see it written. But, oh, by the way, but don't put the hashtag, the number sign, remove that hashtag. Where you see the two hashtags, remove that, okay? So write, the Negro is not, period, any more than the white man, period. Remove the hashtags from Negro and white man. And write it exactly as is. Okay, capital T at the beginning of the sentence, and then capital A at the beginning of the other sentence. Okay. And then put a period. Now, tell me, when you write it in your Google or your Word, did you see any red or any blue? Did you see any spell check? Or do a spell check, do a grammar check. Do a grammar check and tell me what happens. This is an exercise I'm asking the entire class to do. Open up a blank document in Google, a Google document or a Word, and then just start typing. Just put, the Negro is not, full stop or period, whatever you call it. The Negro is not any more than the white man, and write it exactly how I have it, excluding the hashtag and the parentheses at the beginning and at the end, and remove the comma and put a period because that's how he has it. That's how Frantz Fanon have it in his book. He has, the Negro is not, period, any more than the white man, period. And tell me what happens. You can even write it in your either social media stuff too, or write it on like as if you're doing a tweet or Facebook or LinkedIn post, and tell me what happened.
Sir, there's no red line or anything.
No red line?
No red line.
Well, there shouldn't be any red line. Good. Any blue line?
No, sir.
Really?
Sir, what they did, they separate the anymore. That's the only thing. That's the only thing that they did.
Okay, but you have it as two sentences, and they're not telling the correct. Okay, the first time I did this exercise, my system was telling me it's not correct. That I should not put a full stop. First of all, it's two sentences that look as if it should be one. Yes. You know, the Negro is, so the first time I wrote this, my computer said, no, there was an error. And I thought I made an error. So I said, wait, they must have made an error here. Why is it the Negro is not? That's not a sentence. Is that a sentence? The Negro is not. Is that a sentence?
No, sir.
Right, he said, it's as if it's a phrase. The Negro is not, full stop. And then he begins by saying, any more than the white man. What? Full stop. He writes it. So, okay, when I ask you, what do you notice about this in terms of looking at it from a vernacular perspective? The Negro is not any more than the white man. That's if an English teacher was an English teacher within the standard was to mark this, there was no, that should be one sentence. But this was the beauty of Frantz Fanon. He is making a point. In fact, not only is he making a point, he is making a most pivotal and powerful point. He is making a most pivotal and powerful point. The Negro is not, and then put a full stop. He is straying from the standards of language, the standards of writing. He does not subscribe to the standard of writing. And that is important. And that's one of the points that Homi Baba makes in her book, which we're going to talk about in later on throughout the course. When we start to talk about V.S. Nepal a little bit and what she said about V.S. Nepal, I don't think we're going to have time to get there because I'm such a long meter. Anyways, this is a very important point. Homi Baba talks about the center and the periphery. That is a very important concept in post-colonial studies. Even within Pan-Africanism, even within Caribbean thought, the center and the periphery. We talk periphery, sorry. We talk about the global north and the global south. These are tropes, visual tropes that provides a powerful visual within which to understand the dynamics of peoples and groups within societies and outside of societies, within and among societies and so on. Very important. We talk about, say for example, I talk about how artificial intelligence is changing the dialectic of life, this dualism, whether or not we live to work or we work to live. That was the dialectic under capitalism at one time, stemming from slavery, moving into this kind of explosion of production capacities. Talk about Max Weber studying capitalist societies. We studied the economic system within capitalist societies. From the 17th, 18th, 1900, beginning of the 19th century, industrial. What spurred the Industrial Revolution was, according to Max Weber, because this idea of hard work, this Protestant ethic of hard work. And so there was a dialectic a dialectic that people created of whether or not we live to work or we work to live. And even within a biblical understanding of life, so man shall work to the sweat of their brow. In order for us to work, to live, we need to work. But then we talk about the nature of work. As you study civilizations from one civilization to the next up to this point, the nature of work changes and the value we place on work change based on human nature and circumstance. And this human drive, this selfish drive for this greed. But whether or not we live to work has been displaced. Because then we're talking about, as we move into the 19th century to the 20th century, we talk about a consumer society. What kind of society now we talk about a consumer society, but America was seen as a consumer society, and post-industrial countries were seen as consumer societies, while the global South was more worker societies. But then you move beyond that, but the dialectic of whether or not we live to consume or consume to live. But no, that is displaced, because whether or not we work to consume or consume to work, because now we're looking at artificial intelligence and what artificial intelligence means for people, for humanity, and for human being and their work. Because artificial intelligence will replace work. So work is what we use to generate income. And people's work certain work carries with it certain value. And that value attracts a certain compensation and that compensation is what is used to determine as well class in society. And then certain people in society have access to certain education that predisposes them to certain work that will always help them to maintain their dominance and their status quo. Sorry, their dominance. But anyway, this dialectic of whether or not we live to work. And so one of the dialectic that we talk about is the periphery and the center and the periphery. Jadine, your mic is on. I'm making a very important point. The center and the periphery. The standard and the non-standard. Yes? Creole and dialect as against the standard. What is acceptable and what is not acceptable. The standard is acceptable. You operate at the center, that's acceptable. Those at the periphery, at the fringes, the Rastas, the Creole, a certain kind of writing and speaking, so on and so forth, is looked down upon because those things come from the subaltern. It comes from a kind of people and a kind of society that's seen as low-born or not high-classed. Anyways, but the fact of the matter is, Frantz Fanon does not subscribe to standard English and to the standard way of writing. That was his violence. That was his violence. So when I talk about violence being the opium of the people, of the masses, violence being the opium, the method to secure freedom and independence and so on and so forth. Yet violence is outlawed in a sense in some places. Anyways, that was his violence. It was where he disrupts the narrative. Yeah, you notice that disrupt the narrative. He disrupts the narrative. He disrupts the visual. He disrupts the standard. He goes against the grain. He goes against standard English of speaking to make a powerful and pivotal point. So he says the Negro is not, and put a period where a period doesn't usually go. It's supposed to be a comma, any more than the white man. But he puts the Negro in one sentence, but it's as if he was writing, he was trying to separate the two, but he was still trying to provide a singular individual focus of the other. He was still trying to empower and to promote the individuality of the man, of the Negro. The Negro is not. But in a sense, he wanted to give the Negro his own identity, his own space, his own place, his own humanity, his own world, a world where he is not compared. Or in order for him to find his individuality, in order for him to find his empowered self, it should not take any comparison within the dominant, within a particular supremacy. So he put the Negro within his own reality, the own sentence, and he put a full stop, because the Negro is not to, the Negro should not need to be compared with anybody else in order to realize his humanity, his individuality. And then he puts a full stop, and then he says, any more than the white man. It was a violence. He interrupts our narrative. Any more than the white man. That was not what he intended. But, you know, we talk about exegesis, and we talk about Jesus. When you study, we talk about the Bible and how Jesus at times spoke in parables. How he spoke in parables. We ask you, who is Frantz Fanon audience? When you read this, and then of course you look at the Bible and talk about Jesus talking in parables, and we talk about you have to look at the parables. You look at, and then you have to practice exegesis. The Negro is not full stop any more than the white man. He was disrupting our narrative with a kind of violence. Frantz Fanon in Black Skin, White Man. He psychoanalyzes the colonized. And who is the colonized? The systematically controlled man or woman. The systematically controlled woman. He psychoanalyzes them in a way to, he removes the dominant view within or of comparisons. The dominant view, because say, for example, you are comparing a thing to another thing, you compare it within the dominant view. You're comparing a poodle to a bulldog. You are comparing, but he doesn't want to make, he wants to give the poodle his own identity. Oh, but that's a very bad example I'm using. Extremely bad example, because that's not the idea that he's trying to, okay? Because we know, we talk about white supremacist culture. We live a racial society that, okay, and so the Negro is always compared to the white man. But he says no, the Negro the Negro should not find his individuality within the dominant. He removes the dominant view of comparison, striving for the empowered self. Now, according to Homi Bhabha, here, the familiar alignment, notice the familiar alignment of colonial controlled subjects is disturbed by a break, a pause from the usual. So it's a break from the usual to reveal a truly authentic self. Homi Bhabha, in the location of culture, she said, and this is what she said, I said, according to Homi Bhabha here, the familiar alignment of colonial controlled, and I put a particular kind of comma here to suggest, I put the word control to suggest the meaning for you guys. Colonial controlled subjects is disturbed by a break, a pause from the usual to reveal a truly authentic self. A truly authentic self. When we hear of Caribbean, when we hear of Jamaica or the Caribbean, when we hear of Jamaica or the Caribbean, we think of beautiful paradise with sun, sea, and sand, reggae music, cannabis, and Irie people like Usain Bolt, people who are living out their best dreams, desires, and lives. But neoliberalism analyzes this motif, this prevailing view, this prevailing idea. Motif is prevailing view, prevailing idea, motif. Given the historical and current economic and political situation of Jamaica and the Caribbean and the global South. In an attempt to escape the adverse realities of poverty, inequality, and injustice, the people of the Caribbean find them, the people of the Caribbean, in an attempt to escape the adverse realities of poverty, inequality, and the people of the Caribbean, the people of the global South, that includes the Caribbean, find themselves in North metropolises. I wonder what I mean by North metropolises. In North metropolises with very little agency and minimal change to their lives. In fact, except for the use of cleaning neoliberal waste, the immigrant is usually portrayed as an alien with 3 heads and big sharp teeth, seeking to steal and destroy the profit and disrupt society. As such, we will discuss Black, Brown, and Pan-African struggle for economic prosperity, justice, and freedom, and consider efforts, abilities, or inabilities to chart their own futures since decolonization and realize real, notice the word, real political independence and economic prosperity. Perhaps they are charting their own course by the few corrupt of the status quo, the few corrupt of the status quo. Who are benefiting from partnerships with the neoliberal regime of the Washington Consensus. I put Washington Consensus in bracket. I'm not going to define what that means. I'm going to deal with it in another class. But if you guys can read around this concept, Washington Consensus, that'd be great. Advocates of the bureaucratic phenomenon, while the masses are left behind. The masses are left behind. That's a very important point, which I'm going to talk about that in a little bit more, but I won't be able to talk about that right now. But, and then, I don't know if I had delved into that, but, oh, come on now. I hate when this happens. There we go. And by the way, I'm going to send you a copy of this. We talk about tracing Caribbean thought. This is not really tracing Caribbean, tracing the invention of Caribbean, probably from 1400s all the way up. Competition, sugar plantation, heroes and maroons, abolition of rights and loss, freedom and independence in the 1960s. Sorry, in the 1800s. Romain, go ahead. Romain, go ahead. Go ahead, Romain. Romain, I see your hand up, but I can't hear you.
I heard you make mention of Walter Rodney on a few occasions. Where
Yes.
you didn't go in depth as it relates to Walter Rodney. So I'm wondering if it's the same Walter Rodney, the Guyanese.
Yes. I have a deep, because I'm not ready to talk about Walter Rodney yet. I will talk about Walter Rodney because Walter Rodney wasn't until the 1980s. But to be honest, I really don't want to talk about that yet because until after you watch Life and Death. After you watch Life and Death, then I will move. I want to talk about Guyana. But if you want to do some reading around Walter Rodney, that's great. And I can send you some articles and recent readings and so on about Walter Rodney. But yeah, he's from Guyana. And by the way, who's Ramon? Sorry, Romain, very good. Very good that you identify with Walter Rodney. And what did you learn, or how do you know about Walter Rodney? What have you learned about him?
First, I was listening to Protege album Asian Future. and he makes some mention about Walter Rodney with you, Shara. So
Yes.
then I started to look into Walter Rodney, you know, about the whole Pan-Africanism and everything, you know. So
that is Caribbean thought. In fact, if you want to do that, if you want to do a paper on that or a presentation, I mean, if you want to do I know I give you guys group work, and probably your group might want to do a research on Walter Rodney and this whole, and his importance to the whole Pan-African movement, which ultimately led to his death, to his demise. Just like Bishop in somebody else, another group could look at Bishop and Grenada, and Bishop and Grenada, and how with the People's Revolutionary Army and how they met their demise. And when you study how these people met their demise, it's like a thread. You see the extra how post-colonial, global, how countries, post-industrial countries have helped to affect the Caribbean and these diverse thinkers. I mean, if you study the 1940s, 50s, 60s, 70s, 80s, it was quite dynamic in the Caribbean. And we talk, that's why I say when I hear people talk about, you know, what does one country, Caribbean country, have to do with it? And you talk about, we talk about CLR James and talking about Fidel Castro, and then Michael Manley and Fidel Castro, and then Romain so beautifully talk about CLR James. Oh my God, you're reading, man. This is beautiful. This is like putty. I feel like ending class now, to be honest. I love it. Talk about, because you know, no one has ever mentioned Walter Rodney in any of my Caribbean thought class, taking that initiative. So I find it quite powerful that you would do so. And please, and his connections with you, Shara, that means you were listening deeply. Not only did you mention, but that it shows how united we were in this fight, how connected these Caribbean, and how connected we are, and how Haiti is, as part of that West Indian or Caribbean experience, should be part of our concern. It's quite powerful. But the fact that you mentioned it, I would love for people to do some reading around those. And I said to people, you know, people ask what to do. I'm not putting any pressure on you. If you want to do send in a paper, great, that's great. And we could share it with the group. That's really good. We're going to talk about Hugh Shearer with the whole Guyanese situation leading to his demise. And of course, Bishop leading to his demise. CLR James as well. And a powerful and influential figure he was. We'll talk about them. But first, we're talking about external diverse. Notice I've been talking more about public Homi Baba location, of course, because some of these people have helped to shape our Caribbean thinkers. Okay, so when we study diverse currents, yes, we're looking at Hugh Shearer, Michael Manley, Edward Seaga, and Bob Marley. We're looking at Louise Bennett. We're looking at Rex Nettleford, Edith Clark. We're looking at Stephanie Black. Yes, we're looking at these people. We are, but Ramiro Sawan. But many of these persons have had when you look at the people who have shaped them, and it is within this critical thinking as well. So thank you so much for raising that, and I will be certain to present. I will talk about, not on Wednesday, but next week. We are going to talk about 3, and I think I already he's on this presentation. I don't know if you. He's on the presentation. We started this. We look at Arawaks to Africans, but we challenged some of the ideas, because Arawaks to Africans, as if they leave out the part that shows that any connections, what happened to the Amerindians and so on. It's as if there is no connections. But we talk about Kant, social origins, Marcus Garvey. I don't know. We haven't delved into Marcus Garvey yet. George Padmore, Homi Baba. We dealt with Homi Baba at length. This one is this was CLR James, I believe. V.S. Paul, Franz Fanon. This doesn't. I have another slide with everything else, but so Homi Baba. This is CLR James, V.S. Paul, Franz Fanon, and then Walter Rodney will be the last one we look after that, and then we continue. We have several other people we're going to be looking at. So I've created a slide and I've highlighted each. So we will look at him. So thank you so much. But let us continue. I'm going to take a quick break now. when we continue, what I want to do is I won't continue with this particular section of the lecture. I'm going to share I'm going to share an article on West Indian slavery. I promised to share that, and then we'll wrap up. I was going to share a video with Mr. Brian Concanen. He actually came to the class last semester and presented. And what I was going to do today, since he didn't come, I was going to play that. But of course, I spent the entire time doing something else. But that's fine because he's going to come to the class anyways. But I still wanted to give you, because I don't want him to come and present. And by the way, his organization tweeted something about the issue of debt and foreign penetration. The way he said there are two things that that post-industrial countries and global north countries that have done to hold down Haiti, and you could use Haiti as a case study of the strategy to hold down or to other countries in terms of in the Caribbean and so on. Of course, he talked about the issue of debt, creating debt. Structural adjustment was one way we had debt, but of course, through Haiti was something. So creating debt was always a strategy. The first thing that they learned the idea of debt from France, because what France did was to create a debt burden over Haiti in order to keep them dependent, in a sense. And then, of course, what happened in the speed forward in the 1960s, when all of these former colonies became independent. Then what happened by the 70s and the 80s and the 90s? Structural adjustment happened, the oil crisis, loans with conditionalities with structural adjustment. And then that led to debt. You see, a debt again. Haiti became independent first. They got emancipation and independence at the same time. They were freed. But according to Brian Concanen, which is true, and I've talked about that, they use debt in addition to foreign penetration. Penetration and debt, two strategies. When you study strategy to control countries, debt and penetration. But when you look at the Caribbean, and you look at the issue of penetration and debt, Jamaica, and you look at other parts of throughout the Caribbean, and it's not just Jamaica, Trinidad, all of us, we all have huge debts to pay, but probably not as Trinidad, not as much, and so on. But countries of the global south, not the Caribbean countries, poorer countries, and so on, developing countries, there is the issue of debt, and there is the issue of penetration. But this is not new. The issue of debt and penetration was a strategy that was learned from the 1800s. The 1800s, when there was the issue of, again, Haiti, debt hanging over Haiti's head, and the issue of penetration, constant invasion and penetration. And of course, the same thing happened. So, and if you can't use debt or penetration, another way is through embargo. Cuba. Embargo. So of course you have to, you talk about, so I want you to think about those three things. When you talk about what has affected the mixed realities of the Caribbean, what has created our dependency and our lack, our uncompetitiveness, in the region. The fact that in the 1950s and 60s, we were on par. In fact, we were ahead of Singapore. Right now, Singapore is way ahead of the Caribbean in terms of GDP and income and so on and so forth. But of course, when you study Singapore is a different, the dynamics of Singapore. Singapore is a very monolithic society. And of course, in the Caribbean, you could say, well, it's not much it's not really a monolithic society, but in a sense, it's and you find they are an Eastern culture. The culture here we are part of the Western civilization. But that's a quite interesting issue to look at where we were and where we are now. Why is from 1950s to now, from the independence to now, and And when you study income inequality and poverty, and what has happened and the issue of relative deprivation says that societies where there's high amount of income inequality will suffer from high criminality. Okay, that's a Marxist materialist theory. But anyways, we will take a break here. And then when we come back, I want to wrap up the class by sharing an article that I wrote for this class, actually, which will end the class. Okay. It speaks to a groundbreaking theory, a groundbreaking idea. Well, it's not really, maybe it's not groundbreaking, but I think in a sense it may be. But we're going to talk about that in a second. We'll take a 10 minutes break and then we'll wrap up with that when we come back. It's now 9:34. We come back at, I think I only need 15 minutes to wrap that up, and that will end the class. Okay. So again, we will wrap up in a couple of minutes. So you take a break now, come back at 9:45. Okay?
Morning and welcome to the Northwest Check-In right here on G-Town Radio, 92.9 FM WGGT LP Philadelphia, and online at G-Town Radio. And our guest for this morning is here. It is Germantown's own Ronaldo McKenzie. Ronaldo,
yes.
Thanks for stopping in this morning.
Yes, sir. Definitely.
I know you've got a book out. We're going to talk about your book a little bit, and we're also going to talk about you right here in the community. Just for those who don't know who you are.
Yes.
Give us just a little background on yourself.
Well, good morning, everyone. It's good to be in the studios today.
Indeed, I would just say that this is a special event for us here at the station, and you may not even be aware of it, Ronaldo, is that 2 years ago, when the pandemic, pretty much around the time that we had began this program, the Northwest Check-In, as a chance to check in on the community, provide them with information to navigate through the COVID-19 pandemic. And we have obviously, like many businesses, and Northwest Check-In right here on
Pen. But I got in there and I was able to, I got into Temple and Drexel, and then someone asked me to apply to University of Penn. Positive human opportunities for the human being, and University of Penn really grounded me. And I did a research and I was able to publish a book that looks at poverty, looked at inequality. And I think it was the book Life Jamaica, Life and Death, not the book, the Netflix film Life and Death by Jamaica Kincaid and Stephanie Black, which really given me this kind of interest in studying things of that affects the human, because we are about promoting positive human opportunities for the human being, and competitiveness and fairness. So I decided, let me study that, because I'm from Jamaica. What are the effects of globalization?
Right.
What creates the dynamics in the world that causes brain drain, that causes that kind of global south, global north dynamic? And when we talk about global south, we talk about the developing countries. We no longer use global south, and we no longer use third world. We no longer use third world, or we use global south, which is more inclusive word, because language is important, as I said to you. So but I am about, currently I have graduated from Penn. I'm at Georgetown University to do my doctorate of liberal studies, and I'm a student of liberal studies. And liberal studies speaks to issues of ethics and human value. Issues of ethics and human value, because and I would encourage anyone to to be a student of liberal arts. So I study liberal arts. I study things that challenge the development of human society, issues that challenge our progress. And I've been here since 2009, but I actually moved fully in Philadelphia, in Germantown in 2012.
Okay.
And it has been great. I'm a member of Phi Beta Sigma fraternity, and I have several friends in the community. I'm involved in our church. I go to the church at Old First UCC Church. No, I mean, of all the places in Philadelphia, I thought it was one of the communities I really was fascinated with. There is this inclusivity. There is this people. There is this diversity, and there's always something happening in the community. I believe when I came here, there's something that, and not only that, it's close to the suburb. It has this suburban feel. Right. There's this openness. There's this space that you have, and so that's what I like about the air. And it's next to Lincoln. Maybe that's where some of the pond or the lake or whatever. That's where it's coming from. But the air, and it's hilly. And I'm from Jamaica, which is very mountainous and hilly, and I like that. It's not flat. So there's the atmosphere and the feel.
I was kind of growing up in Jamaica and combining, but it's not just about.
Yes, and another thing is, and the next thing is the people are inviting. The people are inviting, easy to talk to, and I decided that this is where I want to settle in Germantown.
Just what you kind of alluded to what inspired it, and that was kind of growing up in Jamaica and combining. But it's not just about within Jamaica, the citizens of our community.
Yes.
Interesting going on culturally, civically, community minded to check in and be part of the program. And we're getting just kind of touch on your book here. It's called Neoliberalism, Globalization, Income Inequality, Poverty, and Resistance. Just what you kind of alluded to what inspired it, and that was kind of growing up in Jamaica and combining. But it's not just about within Jamaica. It's a more broad book, right?
The book, and the book was reviewed by Kirkho's Review and Online Book Club and several others. And I think some of the book reviewers would see, for example, Kirkho's Review said that it's an erudite analysis. It's an erudite analysis of Jamaica's economic history. But I wouldn't. But it's not just about Jamaica's economic history. It's look at the dynamics of human society.
And sort of using Jamaica as
a case study.
Yes. Just for those listeners who may be unfamiliar, can you kind of give us a brief history of Jamaica and why this is a good case study?
It's a good case study because, say for example, Jamaica, and just so you know, Prince William and Princess Kate, they went to Jamaica recently, and there is this huge, some Jamaicans are for the monarchy. Jamaica is still, England is still our head of state. The Queen Elizabeth is still our head of state, but Jamaica was a colony of Britain. But before so, of the Spanish, Christopher Columbus discovered Jamaica in 1492, and we were a colony of Jamaica. And after that, the English took Jamaica from the Spanish, and they started the slavery or the slave trade, and the sugar plantation. They started to do. So Jamaica was part of the whole slave trade, where some slaves came from Africa. And of course, and the slaves stopped in Africa, they provided spices and so on. So the slave trade, so they were part of that. But of course, after slavery was abolished in 1833 in Jamaica, the emancipation of slavery was in 1833, and the abolishment of slavery was in 1866. This was 30 years after the abolishment. What happened was that many of the slaves left the plantation, so there was indentured servitude or indentured laborers, people from China and India. So you saw that so Jamaica is mixed up of Chinese, Indians, and cross-pollination. And so what happened is that Jamaica over time has since moved towards independence in 1962 in a way to develop there and to carve their own history. But what has happened is that Jamaica has had to liberalize its economies. They have to, and at one moment when Jamaica got independence in 1962, they used the British dollars. They used sterling pound, and it went from the sterling pound to the Jamaican dollars, and they had to liberalize the economy. So they had to remove tariffs, deunionize, open up their economy so as to create penetration, because as they became independent, at the same time the world was speeding towards globalization.
Right.
You know what was going on in the world. So many of these states, Jamaica, Barbados, Trinidad, and many of the former Caribbean colonial countries, the countries that were once colonies of Britain, they went in the 1960s and in that period were affected by what was happening in the world. And of course, by the 1970s, they met with the oil crisis. And the oil crisis really affected these countries to the sense that they are vulnerable and they're smaller states. And so, and as a result, they needed money, and they went to they went to the IMF and the World Bank, and they got, and that's what we talk about structural adjustment. They created a plan with the WTO and IMF and the World Bank to help vulnerable states as the world moves towards globalization and the world moves towards crossing borders, including the Caribbean islands, because part of globalization is to cross borders. You want to facilitate this crossing of borders, the exchange that takes place between countries. But part of this exchange, there is this unfairness. What is this that creates poverty? What it is that creates inequality? What it is that puts people behind? So when I came to the US, I was interested in that. I wanted to find out, why is it that people in the Caribbean, people in the global south, why is it that their lives are so vulnerable compared to the other countries? And so I wanted it to be more interdisciplinary. And so that led me to the point of wanting to explore the issues of poverty, because I come from poverty in a sense, not really poverty but I come from compared to the US, I come from poverty, and the experience of poverty, as I said to you, is different. The poverty in the Caribbean that people experience is kind of, they have a bucolic society. In the US and post-industrial country, the kind of society is different. So I wanted to understand that, and the international arrangements that creates income inequality, poverty, and then explore solutions to that. And so of course when I came here, I started to I worked with Martin Oppenheimer and Walter Litt and some of these people to study this concept of globalization. And of course I was reading several books. Martin Oppenheimer was very influential in my life. But I wanted to understand, I was interested in globalization because Jamaicans travel, people of the Caribbean, the world is about travel. People travel, and I said in the book, people travel for opportunity.
Right.
People travel to get to the next level, and the world has always been about travel. But of course, there are those who are preventing travel. You know, there's the immigration issue, and I wrote recently, until we deal with the problem of immigration, or the problem of poverty and income inequality, or the unfairness within competition, or the unfair competition in society, we won't deal with immigration. So we won't fix the problem properly or resolve it.
So you're saying that the immigration issues are really related to income inequality and poverty, because people are looking for greater advances.
Yes,
and improvements.
yes.
Okay.
So people are looking to advance, and people have and travel. The story of America is the story of immigrants coming here looking for opportunity. The story of people in the global south and vulnerable people are people who are struggling, looking for opportunity, and travel facilitates and produces. Immigration speaks to that issue of travel, and globalization speaks to that, because globalization is about crossing borders, and we are to facilitate this kind of cross-border relations, or the exchange that takes place in humanity, because life is about people and how people relate. Life is about people and how people relate. And we talk about communication. Communication is to make popular what was the monopoly. Popular what was the monopoly. And so what we are doing, and globalization facilitates this kind of exchange, this kind of movement, and so on. But it also brings with it brain drain. Say, for example, I'm from, where the best and the brightest are leaving. So I wanted to understand all those concepts. The fact that people are moving and that they have to move. And at the same time, there are immigration policies that is preventing that. So one thing that I talk about is connectionism. I talk about the fact that the kind of Protestant ethic that drive us no more. It's not one of the Protestant ethic or the one of, that was what Max Weber says, hard work, savings, and so on. But it's one of nepotism and greed and connectionism, where people form connections and groups and association that and then create laws to govern that trade and to facilitate international movement. But more often than not, some persons benefit and others don't, and so that's what we have. So globalization helps to facilitate this, but in a sense there are winners and losers.
Right.
But why are there winners and losers?
That was my question. I was gonna, what do you see causing this divide? Is it,
Yes.
I mean, on one hand we're talking globalization,
Yeah.
when you think about it from an economic and business aspect, you know, you start to go, okay,
Yeah.
it seems to be without getting into like a heavy duty political
Yes.
discussion, it seems that those in the corporate larger scale are all for it when it benefits them, yet when they see the individual seeking the opportunity, that is frowned upon, yet
Yes.
it is still that the divide, it doesn't seem to be equal. So
That is true. You know, I have said that what I have said is that what has happened with the Caribbean or the people of the global south, or people who are not meaningfully involved in globalization that is neoliberalized.
Right.
And when I talk about neoliberalism or neoliberal, neo means new, liberal means free. So we're talking about breaking down barriers to globalization. But Michael Crozier talks about the bureaucratic phenomenon.
Right.
And the bureaucratic phenomenon is, in a sense, a duplicitous, deals with issue of duplicity, deals with issues of hypocrisy or Pharisaicalism, where you say, do as I do, but not as I say. So what happened was that, say for example, the World Trade Organization and many of those international bodies are created. And when they were created so that persons can abide by certain rules and agreement that is to fair game and competition. And I've always said that I am for competition. Nothing is wrong with competition, but the problem of competition is, one, there are those who has already gained a competitive advantage in the world. And so if you have already gained some kind of competitive advantage in the world at the expense of others, and now you're moving in a globalized world, we have to facilitate their inclusion in the world. We have to try to facilitate their development in the world. And so what has happened is that when organizations came together with rules and guidelines that would say, for example, talking about structural adjustment policies to regulate the economies, certain guidelines have to be fair. So in the sense that say for example, I talk about this in my book, at one instance, in an effort to speed towards globalization, so as to facilitate multinationalism and transnationalism, which was actually the overall what has happened with neoliberal globalization. One of the things that we know that was part of the structural adjustment agreement with the IMF, the World Bank, and which falls on the WTO, because World Trade Organization is about facilitating trade between countries and so on. And then the IMF and the World Bank was created to provide smaller states and developing states with the aid so that they can meaningfully engage the world, this new thrust of globalization. But this is what happened. As I said, I talk about the bureaucratic phenomenon, or this issue of Pharisaicalism, where do as I say but not as I do. The problem is, say for example, farmers and milk producers in Jamaica and in some Caribbean islands could not now subsidize, because you don't want unfair trade.
Right.
You want it to, so part of this neoliberal globalization, which I said is a strategy, because I'm going to speak to the issue of strategy.
Mm-hmm.
Strategy was here it is that the US and other post-industrial countries, the post-industrial countries, were subsidizing their farmers and so on and so forth, while in the global south and these other countries, they they were part of the agreement, and they couldn't subsidize the local. That was part of the agreement. So you see, we're talking about we're talking about globalization, we're talking about facilitating trade, and talking about fair game. But here it is that there's other persons from other countries who are already dealing with the past, already dealing with the past of colonialism and so on. Now, met with the issue of an inability to provide necessary developmental gains or investment in their country based on WTO's ruling, which now puts them back. It puts them back because now they have to get a loan, what do they apply to the loan? They apply what they believe that how the Caribbean, and say for example, Michael Manley was the former Prime Minister of Jamaica, indicated in an interview some time ago, talks about the fact that they were given loans then because because the problem in the Caribbean is money. They don't have money, and we know tourism and bauxite and so on, and agriculture is no longer part of the. Say for example, the Caribbean used to export banana, but after NAFTA, they no longer, because they had a preferential agreement.
Oh, I didn't know that.
But of course, because it was against WTO policies. So the point I'm making is that you see, globalization and the world comes together to facilitate trade and so on. But at the same time, where are some of these countries starting from?
Exactly. So you have a country that's already, again, we'll use Jamaica as the example. It's a small province. It has, as you mentioned earlier, on the scale of poverty.
Yes.
It's definitely, and the race is their way down here.
Yes.
And so, and they're having to compete or at least factor that. But how does this impact the actual individual?
Yes.
That's what I guess it's.
It
like a citizen, a person, a human being living in Jamaica.
In Jamaica is, you can, when you watch Life and Death, and even if you listen to the stories, and the fact that Jamaica has people in the Caribbean. We talk about brain drain.
Mm-hmm.
The fact that people travel. I said, okay, I listened to the introduction of my book,
sure.
Really, and you have to. This is quite interesting, and I thought because I believe it also talks about my experience as an individual of the global south moving to the global north, and you're talking about global south, global north dynamic, and so on. I said, when we hear of Jamaica, we think of the Caribbean, we think of beautiful islands of paradise, with sun, sea, and sand, reggae music, cannabis, and Irish people like Usain Bolt.
Okay, let me just finish this section.
People who are living out their best lives and desires and dreams. But this book analyzes this motif, given the historical and current economic and political situation in Jamaica and the global south. And I said, in an attempt to escape the adverse realities of poverty, inequality, and injustice, the people of the global south find themselves in north metropolises. Notice I say north. I'm playing with it. I'm being very deliberate when I say north metropolises, the post-industrial country, with very little agency and minimal change, to their lives. So, there is no escape for the person from the global south. There is no escape. So they feel locked in because there you have some Jamaicans feel as though it's a political issue. That the politicians are weak-kneed and lack vision, and that and of course in Jamaica there's the issue of criminality. So Jamaicans and people of the global south are always looking to travel. They're always looking for opportunity. Because for many Jamaicans and many people in the global south and vulnerable countries, there is no hope except outside of their own countries.
And I'd like to get back to that and talk about how it impacts the country itself due to brain drain.
Yes.
But let's take a little break here for those listening again this morning.
Okay, guys, and we are back. It's 9:59.
Ronaldo McKenzie, we're talking about neoliberalism.
It's 9:59 and we are back, and I will wrap up here. I don't think oops. I wanted to talk about something. Read, I think what time? It's 10 o'clock. We're supposed to finish at 10. I was playing that video while we have during the break and then after the break. I hope you guys was able to listen to the conversations. I think I made a Freudian slip about, in terms of Jamaica's, the abolition of slavery. I think I had said 1865, and I also said 1492. No, 1494 was when the Christopher Columbus discovered Jamaica, and it was until 1865 that we got 1833 emancipation, 1865 abolition. Okay. Now, when I wrote this book and my conversations, I never thought about this new idea. And I'm wrapping up the class. I will end in like 5 minutes. There is a new idea, which I don't know if I won't have time. I guess I'll have to introduce it to class next week, and that's what I'll do. I'll introduce it to class. But next week, I mean on Wednesday when we begin class, if Brian doesn't show up and it doesn't come to us on Wednesday, that's great. That's fine actually. It's fine. I have something prepared for you guys. In addition to watching Life and Death, we're going to transition or segue into Life and Death after I have completed a presentation. And the title of the presentation is Unpaid Freedom, Unveiling the Unsettling Legacy of West Indian Slavery. Again, unpaid freedom. And notice, I talk about 1833 to 1865 and gloss over it, even in my book. But there is one very important issue that I just discovered recently, that I just started to, which will be part of my research and writing, which is the issue of reparation, but not prior to 1833. I'm talking about from 1833 and beyond. From 1833 and beyond. And I've said to people, while we can, okay, fine. They say, okay, there's the argument that, there's no reparation between 1833. I mean, you can't prove it, you don't know. However, I don't know, whatever the case is, before 1833, the slaves were slaves, they were property. But after 1833, they were no longer property, they were free. Yet they worked. So I have a presentation, and the presentation said that the abolition of slavery in the West Indies in 18. So I talked about that, but this was very important. The abolition of slavery in the West Indies in 1833 marked a significant milestone in the fight against human bondage. However, the news of emancipation did not reach the enslaved population until about 1865, some places 1866, leaving them to toil as free laborers for over 3 decades without compensation. 3 decades without compensation. This essay delves into the profound injustice endured by these individuals and examines the question of why their emancipation went unrecognized for so long. Furthermore, it explores the implications of this delayed freedom, the potential for lost wages and forced labor, and the need for compensation and remuneration for their toil. And I will stop there. I will begin the next class with this particular presentation because we are out of time. Yeah.
Also, remember that next week you said that you want to do a book review with them?
Oh, thank you. I'm supposed to do a book review. Oh, talk about how to do book reviews, yes?
Yes, sir.
Okay, great. Thank you for.
You want to look at Franz Fanon and other writers.
Yes. Well, I mean, we're going to be looking at them, and we've already started looking at them. I will look at them, but I want outside of that. I want to review some books written by some books written by some Caribbean people. I want to review some books, but outside of that, there's also I wanted to delve into Caribbean thinkers, and of course, there are 5 very important thinkers that we will look at, but that's after we watch Life and Death. One, again, we already started to discuss C.L.R. James, and I think I provide C.L.R. James. No, we already did. We started.
And Norella Keats.
Okay, great. Yes, I have them on the syllabus to do. We actually, it's on the presentation, but we already started looking at Barber.
Yes, sir.
I've already started looking at Barber, but there's something separate. What I want to do is we're going to do a book review, and I'm going to show you how to do the book review, what the important themes well, you already know how to do a book review, but I want to do, but in terms for this class and for our goals and what we want to achieve, there's a particular way that I want you to do a book review when you do book reviews, which I was in a particular class and I found it quite instructive, quite powerful. I'm like, oh, I got to share this with my students. So that it's quite powerful. I'm going to share that with you, which will help you when you do your own reviews of any book, and even in academia, how you study and how to read and review quickly. It's because it was a history class I did, looking at transatlantic slavery, and it was a reading course. We read about every week. We had to read about 10 books every week, and we had to do a review. So how do we do that? I'm going to share that with you guys by reviewing 3 very important books that we have to review for this class, and that would be great. In addition to that, we will delve in terms of main Caribbean thinkers that we want to lift up and think about: C.L.R. James, Michael Manley and Edward Seaga, Bob Marley. When we watch Who Shot the Sheriff, we will delve into Bob Marley. So we don't have to. The film will help us to do that. But in terms of Walter Rodney is on my list. I already have the lecture presentation for Walter Rodney for you guys, but I won't spoil it. But it's great, quite powerful that Romain would raise him. So thank you for that. I never really talked much about Hugh Shearer, so I will actually redo my presentation to include the importance of showing connections and Hugh Shearer and how various Caribbean islands and what each countries were doing and how these powerful people were connected with, how we were all connected and so on. So I won't miss that. So thank you, Romain, for that. And but Walter Rodney, C.L.R. James, Maurice Bishop, and I think C.L.R. Walter Rodney, Maurice Bishop. I'm missing somebody. And of course, there's the Negritude movement and so on. But outside of those Caribbean thinkers, we still have Jean-Paul Sartre. It's very important because he was very influential in Frantz Fanon. Frantz Fanon and Jean-Paul Sartre, they were both of the same school. Okay, but next week, Wednesday, I will finish looking at this presentation, looking at slavery, and this particular idea about slavery came about as a result of came from critical thinking, from doing Caribbean thought. It is from doing Caribbean thought that led me to this particular idea that I want to explore for further study and research and writing. Okay, and that's the beautiful thing about when you start to think critically about things. It leads you to some discoveries and philosophies and ideas that you want to explore and develop some more in research and so on. So this is what has happened, and this is how, and then I wrote it into a paper and submitted it and so on. But this is a very important point as it relates to compensation of West Indian slaves and what happened between 1833 and 1865. But outside of that, we will watch Life and Death. We will visit C.L.R. James. We won't do any more about C.L.R. James. We're finished with C.L.R. James. Anything else that you do with C.L.R. James is from your personal private essay or essay work or group project that you can do. But we will reference him in the class. The next important figures we will explore is V.S. Naipaul, because he's very important to Caribbean. Frantz Fanon was Martinique. We'll delve into him some more. We will delve into, and of course, Walter Rodney and Maurice Bishop from Grenada. Okay, and of course, and that's about it for now. But we'll wrap up now, and thank you guys. In terms of homework, I have not given you guys any assignment per se, but what I would love for you to do is to rewatch the videos and the class lectures that we've done and interact with some of the concepts, the ideas. Say, for example, we talk about the Negro is not any more than the white man. Okay, what is your reading from that? How did that speak to the Jamaican experience and so on? And you delve in, you interact with that. You guys can do that. But for now, I'm not going to tell you to present any homework as yet until Wednesday. After Wednesday's class, then I will give you an assignment to do for an interaction paper. After Wednesday, it will involve reviewing the film Life and Death. Okay, that's the next reflection paper that you will have, interaction paper you will submit for a grade. Okay, anything else is for your own edification and awareness, and for the particular class and the subject material. Okay, all right, guys, thank you guys so much. Have a great night, what's left of it, and see you guys on Wednesday. And I will publish this episode probably by tomorrow. I have a very busy week this week. Okay,
same to you too, sir.
All right, take care. God bless you guys.